So MAGA Republicans are going crazy over the FBI search of Mara Lago, but is there really any basis for this hysteria? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So in my continual quest to respond to the requests of you, my viewers, I'm doing this video today kind of giving you a little bit of a legal background over what's going on at Mara Lago. I mean, as my viewer pointed out, things can get pretty crazy, and it can be kind of hard to understand everything that's going on. So I'm going to try to break it all down here for you over the next few minutes. So as pretty much everybody knows right now, the FBI searched Mara Lago pursuant to a search warrant. This search warrant was personally approved by Merrick Garland, but all indications are that Joe Biden and everybody in the White House had no idea this was going to happen before literally they saw it on the news like everybody else. The warrant was signed off on by a federal magistrate judge. The magistrate judge who signed off on the warrant, Bruce Reinhart, is apparently married to a judge who is appointed by Republicans in Florida. And he actually served in the Republican Department of Justice. So to call him some type of partisan Democrat just doesn't fly. What's more is I'm sure many of you have seen me ranting and raving about Merrick Garland and how I've been frustrated at how cautious he's been in trying to pursue legal action against Donald Trump and his associates. So I think it's fair to say that if Merrick Garland was willing to step up and claim personal responsibility for issuing this search warrant, there is some legal basis for it that we can rely upon. Well, as it turns out, the legal basis that we can rely upon is actually pretty scary. Republicans may have gone berserk over this unprecedented search, and indeed it is an unprecedented search, but that's because, generally speaking, presidents and former presidents cooperate with the National Archives. You see, the idea is that when you're working in the White House, and this is something that I don't think Donald Trump has ever come to understand, you are working for the people. You're not working for yourself. Anything that you produce when you're working there is the property of the American public. It's not your personal property, it's the property of the American public. And indeed, I was struck just about how Donald Trump is demanding that these papers that were taken by the FBI the other day be returned to him. They belong again to the government, to the people. And that has really been the issue here. The relevant piece of legislation is called the Presidential Records Act, which essentially says that any documents that are produced by the president while he or she potentially is in office become the property of the federal government and need to be maintained. In other words, they can't be destroyed, they can't be removed, they need to be left for the archives. Now that raises one of the ridiculous defenses that have been raised by Donald Trump and his allies, which is that supposedly Barack Obama took a bunch of documents from his administration to his presidential library. Well, as it turns out, presidential libraries are operated by, wait for it, the National Archives, which is the national organization whose job it is to maintain these records. Barack Obama doesn't control those documents. They're controlled by the federal government through its agency, again, the National Archives. Now, the initial concerns were raised by the National Archives when they were going through the documents after Trump vacated the White House and found that a number of well-known documents were missing. Those missing documents included things like the love letter he received from North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, as well as the map we all saw on TV where he used a marker to change the course of a hurricane to make it seem like it was going to hit Alabama. So at first, the National Archives tried to work directly with Donald Trump and his attorneys, ultimately resulting in Trump turning over boxes of documents. But again, when the officials from the archives went through these documents, it appeared that some were missing. And what was more shocking to the officials at the archives is the fact that these returns included classified documents, including such sensitive information as nuclear secrets and signals intelligence, two of the most closely guarded secrets that the U.S. government has. These are literally the things that our enemies around the world will pay for, which is exactly one of the concerns that has been raised by a number of ethics critics about what Trump could do as a former president. After all, now that we find out that Donald Trump vacated the White House with boxes worth of classified documents, including such sensitive information as our nuclear secrets, and the codes that we use to communicate on the battlefield, it suddenly makes you wonder what exactly Jared Kushner and Donald Trump did in return for that $2 billion investment. But let's set that aside, because that's just speculation at this point. At any rate, when the National Archives staff realized two things, number one, that there were still documents missing, and number two, that some of the documents that were taken out of the White House were classified, and to that point, top secret, the highest level of classification that there is, again, the kind of thing that you'd see for nuclear secrets or signals intelligence, they notified the FBI about it. Now you have to remember, at this point, the FBI is headed by a former Trump appointee. And by the way, is still headed by a Trump appointee. So this idea that the FBI somehow is associated with the Democrats is absurd. Anyway, at first the National Archives thought that much wasn't happening with the investigation, but it turns out that the FBI was actually pursuing it quite aggressively, interviewing all sorts of Trump allies and associates to kind of determine what had been taken from the White House and when. As a result of this investigation, the FBI, working with the Department of Justice, got a grand jury to issue a subpoena for all documents that Trump had taken to Mara Lago. That subpoena resulted in another group of documents coming into the National Archives. Now remember, this is after Trump had already sent a bunch of documents to the National Archives claiming that he'd already given them everything. And in fact, a Trump attorney specifically says that at this point, Trump has handed over all the documents he's got, which just as an aside, makes you wonder if that lawyer was lying, which could result in discipline for that lawyer, as I've argued in another video, which I'll post to later. But again, when the archive staff went through these submissions, it appeared that there were still missing documents. And that's the point at which the National Archives, working with the FBI and the Department of Justice, got together and started talking about what needed to be done. Well, I'm not going to go through all the steps, but suffice it to say there were a number of steps taken to try to resolve this issue, short of having a search warrant issued. But despite Trump's efforts to appear as if he's cooperating, cooperation never really occurred. And as a result, ultimately, Attorney General Merrick Garland and Magistrate Judge Reinhart agreed that there was no other choice but to issue this search warrant. Now, it's worth noting that this image that we have of FBI agents showing up in their blue jackets with FBI emblazoned on the back is not at all what happened. The search occurred in a downtime at the resort when virtually nobody was there. And in fact, Donald Trump and his family weren't there at the time. Trump actually had to kind of scramble to find an attorney who could go and be present during the search. What's more is these agents did not wear those famous blue blazers. They just kind of showed up in casual clothes. Their goal was not to attract attention. Despite that, of course, we've heard claims that the FBI was planting evidence and everything, but yet, although they didn't allow Trump's attorneys to actually personally watch the search, she was there during the search. And what's more is Mara Lago is filled with cameras, and as it turns out, Trump himself was able to watch the search on closed-circuit cameras. And believe me, if anything had been planted, they'd have seen it. They'd have recorded it, and we'd be seeing the videos right now. The search itself took about 8 hours, and when it was done, the FBI agents had Trump's attorney sign off on a receipt for everything that was taken. Well, as it turns out, some of the things that were taken were almost humorous. Like, for example, there was a document in which Trump pardoned Roger Stone. Now, let's start with this. Why would Trump feel the need to take that with him? And secondly, there's no doubt that that is actually work product of the President of the United States. I mean, it's a government document. It's the type of thing that should be held in the archives. But yet Trump had it on his own personal property. But more critically, the agents removed 11 boxes containing material that is marked as top secret. Specifically, the documents were marked as classified/TS/SCI, which stands for top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information, which again, that's the highest level of secrecy of American government documents, and exactly the type of thing that would include our nuclear secrets. Now, one other critique we've heard from Donald Trump is, oh my God, they searched my personal safe. Well, wouldn't you expect them to search the personal safe? I mean, if he were hiding something, where else would he put it? In fact, I would say if the FBI agent did not search his personal safe, that would be tantamount to malpractice on their part, for crying out loud. But anyway, news of this search got out not because the FBI announced it, but because a Florida political operative got word of it and leaked the information. Upon that leak starting to get out, then Donald Trump himself tweeted out the information. Or I'm sorry, truthed it out. arguing that it was an unprecedented invasion, which again, it was. But I think it's fair to say that's because Donald Trump was unprecedented in some of his behavior. Now, typically the Department of Justice, when it's engaging in these investigations, takes a posture that it will say nothing publicly, because anything that's said publicly can undermine these investigations and undermine the ultimate prosecutions. Well, in really what is a very, very rare step, Merrick Garland took the step of responding to these allegations by making it clear, number one, that he personally signed off on this warrant. Number two, that Joe Biden was not involved in issuing this warrant. And number three, that the Department of Justice would make a motion to the judge to unseal the warrant. That is, to basically make it public so everybody could see it. In other words, Garland, to give him credit, he basically called the MAGA Republicans bluff. And boy, did it hurt when he did. Because that's when we found out what really was at issue here. This is not just some minor issue where we're talking about documents. Something where the Presidential Records Act was violated, which, people have been prosecuted for, by the way. Most notably Sandy Berger, who worked for Bill Clinton. But in this case, we've stepped into a whole new realm here, and that is Espionage Act and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, otherwise known as FISA. Now, one irony about this situation, by the way, is that FISA was amended in 2018 when Trump was president. And he actually signed the bill, which would make it a felony, punishable by up to 5 years of prison for somebody who mishandled classified information. Well, for this claim that somehow we've singled out Donald Trump for this prosecution, it's worth noting that one of the first people who was prosecuted under this law was the former Air Force service person and military contractor Reality Winner, who went to prison for 5 years for basically leaking information that she came across that made it clear that there was a connection between Donald Trump and the Russians that was being investigated by the FBI. In one of the ultimate ironies, Trump has been outraged by the behavior of Reality Winner, but at the same time, he's called her punishment unjustified given the fact that people he believes should be prosecuted more seriously have not been prosecuted. And finally, of course, is the fact that he could ultimately go to jail under this statute. Now, as part of the hysteria over this FBI raid, we've heard multiple calls for violence. And in fact, we did have somebody actually go into an FBI office and try to shoot it up. Fortunately, he was shot before he was able to get in. But these calls for violence really show the way that the right is trying to control the American agenda right now. And it's through threats and intimidation. Exactly the type of thing, by the way, that the Nazis did to try to maintain control of their population. Really, we should be giving credit to Merrick Garland and the FBI and the Department of Justice for deciding to go forward with this investigation, despite the potential for a violent reaction by some on the right. I mean, the law should be applied blindly, no matter what the threats are. And as to these claims that, they're going to raid all of Joe Biden's houses if Donald Trump is elected in 2024, well, you know what? If Joe Biden took classified documents to his houses, I would hope they would. But ultimately, the question is whether any of this will stop Donald Trump from running for president. And the truth of the matter is, the answer is probably not. And then the next question is, will it hurt him in his attempt to become president? And the answer is also probably not. But given how long this video has already become, those are probably topics for another day. And in fact, I would urge you to check out this other video I did over here where I talk about how Trump's attorneys need to be disciplined for their wholesale violations of their ethical duties. Yes, I know, attorneys, we do have ethics. Ha ha ha. But the reality is, if attorneys violate those ethical duties, we can be punished, and Trump's attorneys should be. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.